Weapons, armor, shields, so many things to wear in Baldur's Gate 3, but so few slots. Maybe you're a little too confused on how finesse weapons work or how your AC is actually calculated. Well, in this video, I'm going to break down the details on the 3 armor types, how all the weapon classifications work, and then talk about the fighting styles that multiple classes pull from to help you better get acquainted with weapons and armor in Baldur's Gate 3. If this is your first time on my channel, the way I like to do things here is by upfronting knowledge within my videos so you can decide to stick around if it's the one for you. So to put things simply, your base AC or armor class is 10, and it is then modified by your dexterity and the AC of your armor. The heavier the armor, the less dexterity modifier you get, all the way up to heavy, negating the modifier entirely. As far as weapons go, you have 2 classifications, simple and martial, which fall into a proficiency category, right? You're either proficient with one or the other, or a set individual weapon. Then outside of that, you have other modifiers like light, which allows you to use it in either hand, versatile, which allows you to use 1 or 2 hands for a weapon, and then heavy, which gives a disadvantage for any small race to use. That's really the TLDR of this entire video, and if that's all you wanted to know, please feel free to shut the video down and get back to enjoying your time in BG3. Before you head out, please don't forget to like, comment, and or subscribe. Each one of those things does help me out in a very, very huge way, and I greatly appreciate it. You can quickly navigate to any part of this video that interests you the most by using the chapters in both the timeline and the description. And if you need help with any of the D&D terms that I kind of glossed over in this video, I have a full breakdown of the terms linked in the upper right-hand corner. Lastly, don't forget to follow me on Twitch, where I'll be doing giveaways of BG3 for the next few days. But let's get started here on my weapon and armor guide for Baldur's Gate 3. So to start us off, let's have a conversation about how armor class works. So we're going to hover over this right now, and it's going to say that our armor class is 13. The higher your armor class, the harder you are to hit. Every single thing in the game, unless it has some sort of specialization like, say, a monk or a barbarian or a sorcerer with a draconic bloodline, will just have 10 base armor class. That is your kind of your bare minimum. And then after that, you get modified. Your armor class gets modified by your dexterity. And then that number 2 in and of itself will possibly change based off of your class. Barbarian will pull Constitution in to help out with their armor class. So you have plenty of other classes out there that will actually benefit their armor class from other ability scores. But you're probably looking at this saying +3 from dexterity. How do I know if it's going to be however much from dexterity? Well, it's when you hover over this. Remember how we've talked about how your ability modifier is pretty much the thing that's applied to anything that would give a bonus to it. So we get +3 to dexterity, and this includes our armor class. So taking a look at this, it just shows outright what we've got. And if you ever get confused on anything, press T, it locks the screen, and you can go ahead and dive over it. It says the armor class for your the higher armor, blah, 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 and it shows you your armor class and everything like that. So that is how your armor class is calculated to begin with. But now that you know that, how does armor class get affected by armor? Let's take a look at all of the armor types. I have simple robe right here, which is clothing. I have got leather armor, and then I have got scale mail, which is a medium armor, and then ring mail, which is a heavy armor. What I want you to do is take a look at this shield right there, right? 15, 14, 11, 10. What I want you to think of is that's the number that becomes your new base. Not that you're increasing it by a certain number or anything like that. So let's take a look at our leather armor. Remember, we have a +3 bonus from our 17 dexterity, and our current base armor class is 10. So that gives us an AC of 13. Well, let's put this on. Well, now it becomes an AC of 14, right? Because our base armor is 11, thusly modified by our dexterity by 3. Let's take a look over here at scale mail. So this is medium armor. Disadvantages on stealth check, and you can see right there in the text right here, it says AC bonus from dexterity is limited to +2. So even though I have 17 dexterity, I'm limited now to only getting +2 rather than my normal +3. But the caveat here is that my base armor class is now 14 rather than 11. So let's take a look at what this is going to look like when I wear the scale mail. You see that now it jumps up, right? So we're at 14 armor with the base of the medium armor, but now since we have 3 dexterity, we're only getting 2 of that since we're putting on the heavy armor, the medium armor. You show off my actual armor here. So how does this work with heavy armor? Well, let's take a look. Heavy armor. Body aid, that's part of the actual special for this +1, but it says disadvantage on stealth check yet again, and no AC bonus from dexterity. Let's press T, let's hover over heavy armor. Doesn't say anything, right? So we know that this isn't going to shut off our ability to cast spells like it has done in previous versions of the game, additions. It used to be if you wore like metal armor, you couldn't cast druid or ranger spells. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. And now, some fancy looking ring mail, I'm not going to lie. My AC is 15, right? Because that is our base armor class for heavy armor. That's what I get. And there you go. It's 15, it's 15. Whereas if I was wearing this scale mail, it goes up to 16. It goes up to 16 though, because I am a dexterity focused class. Because you might be thinking to yourself, when the hell is it ever going to be worth it for me to use heavy armor? This will go into a conversation about how weapon damage is fixated based on which ability score. But my point here before we jump into that is that since I'm playing a dexterity themed class with my ranger, I'm getting a lot of benefit from using medium and light and heavy armor. I'm sorry, just medium and light. If I was not a dexterity based class, maybe I'm a fighter, maybe I'm a paladin, maybe I'm a barbarian, and my dexterity and strength are swapped, where I have a +3 to strength and a +0 to dexterity, well, now heavy armor makes more sense to me because I'm pulling more raw armor class into my character because of the heavy armor value. Remember, I'm not getting that AC bonus from dexterity, even though I have a +3. So it makes sense for me to wear heavy armor. But if I were, say, Lizelle here, Lizelle has only a +1 to her dexterity versus a +3 to her strength. Now, she's not going to get that bonus here to her AC in the same way that I did, right? And she's not going to get any kind of strength bonus on her armor in the same way as you do for dex, but it still kind of just stands to reason that she's using strength. That's the primary focus of her character. If I were to give her really good heavy armor that maybe had 16, 17, or 18 armor class, it would be better than her current Githyanki half plate, which actually gives her 16 AC because this counts as medium armor. So again, just to kind of drive that home one more time, we'll look at Shadowheart. She has a dex +1. She is wearing medium armor, which gives her a base of 13. So she has a total of 16 also from her shield, which is a thing I wanted to save at the very last here is shields will just outright add to your armor class because they just say right there, +2 armor class. I think I have even another shield here. I don't know if it's... Yeah, it's a +2 as well. So just to show that off, you pull this off and her AC drops down to 14, which is just 13 +1 from her dexterity. But that is how you have all of your different armor proficiencies, how they all kind of fall together into your armor class, and how shields at the very end of that can really kind of give you a little bit of a leg up in your armor class. Now, as far as weapons go, we have two different classifications. We have martial weapons and simple weapons. I'm going to flash two charts on the screen. You can see these are all of the melee martial weapons as well as the range martial weapons on the left. And then on the right, you're going to see all of the melee simple weapons and all of the ranged simple weapons. So this comes down to your proficiencies, right? Your individual class will have proficiency in either simple or martial or both. And then they might have further racial proficiencies that maybe give them specific uses. Like, for example, elves have a longsword in their racial efficiency. Or if you're a human, you get like spears, proficiencies, and stuff like that. So there are certain race and class combinations that will grant you specific weapons and armor to take advantage of. So you have those all at your disposal. But the question is, okay, what does this all really mean? Well, taking a look at simple weapons, I've kind of broken them up over here for Shadowheart on the left or right sides of her inventory. On the right side, we have got martial weapons. But here's a Morningstar, right? And this is important to kind of make the distinction between these two items. A mace is a 1d6 +1, because it's using my strength check. Anytime you see that plus on the other end, that's showing you that it's using a specific bonus for this. And I'm going to talk about this in just a little bit here. So all weapons are implied to use a strength check unless otherwise. I'm sorry, a strength modifier unless otherwise noted, and we'll get there in a second. So this mace and this Morningstar might look like, oh, this is just kind of the same weapon. Nope, it's not. We're going to press T and lock this. At the bottom left corner of every single little tooltip for any weapon you'll see will show you the corresponding proficiency for that weapon. So this is a mace weapon that's doing bludgeoning damage at a 1d6, that's 1d6 standard die, just a 6-sided die, at a +1. So let's say I roll a 4, well, it's actually a 5. And the proficiency with this weapon also unlocks this. So these are some things that are a little bit different than tabletop, right? Being proficient didn't unlock special actions like we get in Baldur's Gate 3. These are special weapon actions. And then from these weapon actions, we have to see some further information here, right? So this will possibly daze our target, and they can't take reactions and are easier to hit. It's a melee ranged attack, and we want to see that this does a con save. So anytime you see this, either on a spell, a weapon action, whatever it is, con save, dex save, int save, whiz save, whatever it is, it's telling you that when you go ahead and use this ability, that the target has to roll a saving throw of Constitution to save against it. If they save, then they are fine. They're not going to be hurt. It's an attack roll. Short rest until you can reuse it again. So all these things are important bits of information for weapons, but they're also applied to a lot of different things. So just kind of make sure you're always taking a look at this stuff when you are looking at it. Also, you can see that this costs me an action. Maybe if I look at this longsword, Pommel Strike is a bonus action. So I can see that this actually takes place rather than my main primary action. So it's a nice way to kind of get an idea of where or how some of these actions are taking part. So back to the Morningstar and the mace. So looking over at the Morningstar, I see, wow, okay, this is actually a Morningstar specialization, which takes it out of the simple weapon category and puts it into the martial weapon category. So don't just look at something that looks kind of the same and think, oh, this is just the same type of weapon. Why can't I use this? Or what's the problem here? Yes, you can use any weapon without a proficiency in it, but you won't gain access to its weapon actions, and you will have disadvantage when you use it. So those things are worth noting. Oh, that's kind of nice for Morningstar. I'm going to put that on her. But outside of that, we also have some other classifications. But one thing I want to talk about too is here's a quarterstaff and here's a ritual staff. Well, they're both quarterstaves because you see in the lower left corner, this says quarterstaff, right? And this says quarterstaff as well. But what you should also look at with quarterstaff is that they're a versatile weapon. Same thing here with our two-handed sword. So a versatile weapon means that you can be used with one or two hands. Deals more damage when wielded with both hands. And that's why you have two sets of information right here. It shows you an 8-sided die and it shows you a 6-sided die. So the 1d6, whatever the lower value is, shows you what the one-handed value is. The one outside of the parenthetical notation is a two-handed value. So 1d8 is showing me that if I were just to simply equip this quarterstaff, then I'd be using both hands and I would do 1d8. We'll go ahead and show what that looks like. So it says 2d9. It's 2 to 9, right? Because I'm getting +1 on my rolls because of my strength modifier. Well, I'm going to put my shield back on. All right, now it shows 2 to 7 because I'm doing 1d6 +1. Remember, again, strength +1. It shows it all right there for you. Just simply hover over this. You can also see this attack bonus as well for proficiency. So, you know, since I have this proficiency, I can use this. She doesn't have longsword proficiency. So you see how that went from a +3 now down to a +1 because I don't have that proficiency. That's why you really want to take advantage of any item you do have proficiency with. But outside of that, we have some other modifiers to look at. Let's take a look at dagger. Maybe you are like me and you want to dual wield, as you should. You have the light distinction. So this means that your weapon can be dual wielded with another light weapon, meaning that you can only use 2 light weapons to dual wield unless you get a special feat, which I don't really want to get into, but there is a feat that will allow you to kind of do things outside of light weapons, and you can use other weapons to do that. So you can use like swords and whatnot. But if I want to do, let's remove my shield. Let me put my longsword on because the longsword is a two-handed versatile weapon, right? We see it says versatile down there. So let's try to equip this dagger in the offhand. Oh, I can't do it? Why not? Well, because the longsword is light and the dagger is also light. My dog is going to town on his squeaky toy back there. So if I want to do a short sword and a long dagger, I can, because they are both light weapons. That's what it's going to enable me to dual wield in any class that I'm playing. I have to have a special feat that will enable me to use any non-light weapon. Sorry, my dog is just going to town. Outside of that, though, let's take a look at this other modifier on dagger. It has finesse. So remember how I said every weapon is implied to use your strength modifier unless stated otherwise? Well, finesse weapons scale with your dexterity instead of your strength if your dex is higher. It's not rather than or instead of, or it's not, what I'm trying to say is you don't choose. It chooses whichever modifier works best. This is a really good example. Shadowheart has +1 and +1. It doesn't really matter. So it'll choose whichever one. It doesn't matter for all intents and purposes. If I was 14 strength or 14 dex, then one of these would go up by 1, making it 2, and the game would auto pick the one that was higher. So finesse weapons are a way that you can be a character that doesn't have high strength and still does a lot of damage with your melee weapons. Take my ranger, for example. I am using 2 scimitars, which are finesse weapons. I'm using my +3 damage from my scimitar, or from the finesse weapon and my dexterity to get a ton of damage out of them. It's a 1d6. I hover over this and it says total bonus, dexterity +3, proficiency bonus +2. And a big detail about weapons and armor that we really haven't talked about that is outside of the actual weapons and armor are these 4 buttons down here in the lower left corner. Now, you have the ability to use your melee in your range by simply pressing these or just simply pressing F. So if I'm on my melee weapon, press F, switch me to range, press F will switch me on over to melee. Then conversely, you also have the option to swap how you dual wield. So right now, my character is dual wielding. And if I go to attack with my main hand, they will use an action and a bonus action to attack. I can press this button and make it so that I only attack with my main hand, and then I would use my bonus action to attack with my offhand. So if you have, say, 2 weapon training and you're trying to take the most advantage of it, then you can just simply have this set on. Or if you want to use your bonus action in a round and you're dual wielding and you don't want to just waste it on the hit, make sure you've got this toggled appropriately. It's going to be pretty huge for you. Lastly, here you have toggle light source, which will take out a torch or anything like that if you need it in a dire situation. And before we get into weapon types, I want to have a conversation too about some of the other two-handed, more great weapon style of weapons. And we have stuff like a pike, or we have stuff, well, like a glaive and the great axe and the maul. And what you'll notice with these is that you get quite a bit of damage coming out of them. Like the maul here has 2d6 +3. This is the Everburn blade that is from the prologue. If you kill that tiefling commander, you'll get this guy right here, and that does an additional fire damage. So you'll see it gives you the direct allocation of dice that you'll be getting whenever you use that weapon. 2d6 +3, you can see it physically represented right there, and a 1d4 in fire. It's nice there in red. You also get, of course, we've talked about this with your proficiencies, but what I want you to take a look at here is with great axes and with great mauls. Typically in the past, or in the 5th edition, there is a heavy aspect, which is actually not applied in the game. Somewhere or other in this video, I believe that it says it is, but I did some more digging on it, and it is not. And if it's in the video still, I apologize. I've tried to edit it out everywhere, but I just want to try to cover my tracks here. But this again will get your strength modifier and everything. But two-handed, of course, requires 2 hands to use. You'll see, though, with things like pikes and with glaives, unlike with a spear, you'll have extra reach. And this has increased range and can be used to attack from further away. So let's go ahead and press this button with my sword. And that's my range, right? It's a pretty small range of where I can go. I can see this little circle here. That's where I can go, even though this is a two-handed greatsword, right? Now, if I put a pike on, and I go ahead and press this button again, it has a much further range. So you can again see that some of these weapons that do have that extra reach, it's usually about double that range, so you can get a little bit more out of them. It was like right here before, now it's all the way over here. So this gives you a chance to attack someone from further away. They have to get closer to you, but it also increases your attack of opportunity. Your opportunity attack is now this entire circle. So this works both offensively and defensively. So where if someone is within that range and they want to get out of it, then you have them locked into engagement with you at a much further distance than they would otherwise. Now, one of the last things I want to talk about as it pertains to your weapon damage is the weapon damage type. You can see that this mace does bludgeoning, this scimitar does slashing, and this dagger does piercing. So all these things will have different weapon damage that they'll do. You can just kind of see that as you hover over them, right? And it's important to note that certain things will have resistances to those. Maybe you're fighting a rock golem, and the rock golem is going to naturally have a much higher resistance to piercing, a pretty good resistance to slashing, but probably maybe a penalty towards bludgeoning. Who knows what it is? Maybe it's the same thing if you're fighting against an undead. So when you see that, you just kind of want to look at let's go ahead and look at this thing right here. I think it's a tiefling. You'll right click and press examine. And I'm sorry, I don't know what that is if you're on console. And this will show me, you know what, well, she's got a resistance to fire. So I know that I'm okay when it comes to generic damage. But it'll just straight up display in that location if they'd have any kind of resistances towards that specific damage type. And it's also worth noting that across all of these weapons, there's an ability to throw them depending on A, if you're a barbarian, or B, I think specifically a berserker, or B, if it has this right here. Melee weapons that are made to be thrown, such as daggers, hand axes, javelins, light hammers, spears, and tridents. When thrown, these weapons deal the same damage they would for a melee attack, meaning that if I were to throw this dagger, it does 1d4 plus 1. And you don't really ever need to worry about this because the game will just show you naturally what your damage is as it pertains to your strength. Let me show you an example of this here, right? This says 1d5, or I'm sorry, this 1d4 plus 1. Let's drop it and take a look at it on my Ranger. My Ranger, oh, well, this shows me 4 to 7 because I'm 1d4 plus 3. So you can see all the different damage types and how they work by just simply hovering over them. But this is me just explaining how the under the hood works for it all. Now that we talked about melee weapons, it's time to talk about your ranged weapons. So we, just like our melee weapons, we have all the information that we need when we hover over it. We can see that this is a short bow classification. Its range is 60 feet. I'm using the Imperial System, not metric. And then it can see that it says two-handed weapons. If you're familiar with 5th edition, there are no loading weapons in this game. And there's a possibility that they've removed the heavy classification for longbows, which I'll show you in a little bit. Longbows typically had a heavy classification. Heavy means that anyone that is a small race or is considered small as far as their creature type, they would use a disadvantage when using that weapon. Remember, disadvantage means that you're rolling 2 die and taking the lesser of the 2. But if I take a look at this crossbow, I can see that it has a very similar profile to my short bow and my goblin bow, another instance where 2 different named things both share the same proficiency of a short bow. So you can see here's just all the same information you would need otherwise. Let's take a look at a longbow real quick. Now to close our video out, I want to talk about fighting styles. Now we have a lot of different fighting styles to choose from. We have specifically these 5. And depending upon which class you are, you'll be able to pull from these. Fighter gets them at level 1, but Paladin, Barbarian, Ranger, they all get access to different fighting styles at different points in their career. Or maybe you go with Fighter and you go into a Champion and you get a second fighting style. So let's talk about them very quickly. First off, we have Archery. You gain +2 bonus to range weapon attacks. What this means is, remember when we took a look at that longbow, it said 1d8 plus our dexterity modifier? Well, that would be +1 in this instance. Archery then grants us an additional +2. So it actually would be +3. It'd be 1d8 +3. It does quite a bit more damage, right? That would mean that the damage interval would be like 3 to 12, which is nice. Defense, you gain +1 bonus to armor class while wearing armor. So let's assume we were looking at some armor that had an armor class of 12. Well, with this, it becomes 13 as our base. And then the dexterity modifies it, or whatever other dexterity, whatever AC modifiers we have. Dueling used to be called single weapon fighting, but that is not the way it works in 5th edition. When you are wielding a melee weapon that is not two-handed or versatile in one hand, and no weapon in the other, you deal an additional 2 damage with that weapon. What this is saying is if you use a sword and shield, then you get a 2 damage bonus. This is a way to get more damage using a sword and shield versus defense and protection, which are more geared towards defending people, not even necessarily with a shield. So dueling is a way to get a lot more damage out of using that variant and not feeling punished for it. Great weapon fighting is particularly cool here. So when you roll a 1 or a 2 on a damage die for an attack with two-handed melee weapon, that die is re-rolled once. This gives you an additional chance to dish out a little bit more with your great weapons. So if you're going with any kind of two-handed weapon, which is what a great weapon is, you would then use this to take full advantage of that. This guy's using a longsword right now. And then protection, when you have a shield, impose disadvantage. Remember we said disadvantage is you roll 2 die, you take the lesser of the value. On an attack against your allies when you are within 5 feet. You must be able to see the attacker. So this is a reaction, meaning that if you're within 5 feet of your ally and your ally gets attacked, you get the option then, or that creature, because this is a passive feature, that creature then gets disadvantage. This reacts to their action. So just keep that in mind. That's how it works. You're not actively using this skill. It's part of him that kind of passively will drip off. Then lastly, we have 2 weapon fighting. When you make an attack with your offhand weapon, you can add your ability modifier to the damage of the attack. What this means then, if I'm using 2 strength-based weapons, typically the main hand attack, let's say I'm using 2 hand axes, the main hand would just get my strength and the offhand would not. With 2 weapon fighting, that offhand now gets it. So that I think axes are 1d6. So it would get 1d6 plus 3 in my main hand, and my offhand would get 1d6 plus 3. It's worth noting too now, in Baldur's Gate 3, when you attack and you have 2 weapons selected, it will automatically attack with both the main and the offhand. You have to select just the main hand attack if you only want to attack with the main hand. So that's kind of worth noting. But these are all your different fighting styles that go along with all of your different weapons and your ranged weapons and your armor and all that kind of fun stuff. So hopefully this gives you a much better idea on how weapons and armor play into your character, and hopefully it gives you a better idea on how armor class plays into all of this. If you have any questions or need any help with anything, by all means, go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. But have a good one, guys, and take care.